We are ready for Mr. Lavalais. Is that you?
Yes, ma'am.
Introduce yourself, tell us your name and your DOC number.
My name is Albert Lavalais, and my DOC is 330949.
Right, and Mr. Lavalais, your counsel is here in Baton Rouge with us today, so I'd like you folks to enter your names in the record.
I'm Susan Seymour, for Albert Lavalais.
Louis Seymour,
Okay, and go ahead.
Michael Champagne, for Albert Lavalais.
Okay, and generally, council makes the presentation at the end. Let me just recognize the other folks who are here in support, whether it be here or at the penitentiary or on Zoom. We have Karen Lavalais, Akemi Lavalais, Anthony Lavalais, Charles Lavalais. We have the Parole Project here with us on Zoom. Ariel Lavalais, Margaret Rux, Michael Champagne, Ann Wallace, Albert and Patrice Lavalais, Alvin Catchings, Molly Sullivan, and Darrell Waters. So I have Michael Champagne, who will be speaking in support, and we have Albert and Patrice Lavalais, both of whom will be speaking in support, or one of those will be speaking in support. We also have the Parole Project. So the way this is going to work, Mr. Lavalais, I'll read some identifying information in the record.
Yes, ma'am.
And then I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Marabella because your case has been assigned to him.
Yes, ma'am.
He'll take the lead on the interview. Once we get through the interview process, we'll hear from those folks who've indicated they'd like to speak on your behalf. At the very end, you'll be allowed to make a statement, then I'll turn it over to your attorneys to close it out for us with their presentation. Okay?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, Mr. Lavalais, as mentioned, your DOC number is 330949. You're here seeking a commutation of your sentence. You were sentenced in St. Landry Parish, the 27th Judicial District, for first-degree murder. In November 1994, you received a death sentence. That was vacated. In 2001, you were resentenced to life without parole. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you answer Mr. Marabella's questions, please?
Good afternoon, Mr. Lavalais. My name is Tony Marabella. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Lavalais, how old are you, sir?
I'm 57.
You'll be 58 in a couple of weeks or so. How about a week?
July 28.
How long you been in prison on these charges?
31 years, sir.
And how old were you at the time you committed this crime?
I was 19, sir.
I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the 19-year-old Albert Lavalais.
Yes, sir.
Tell me what was going on in your life. How far had you gone in school at age 19?
I went to school 5th grade up to the 5th grade.
And it's my understanding you quit to work on your family's farm. Is that right? Or work as a farm? Tell me why you quit school and what you did after you quit school.
Well, I quit school to help out on the farm. Started working on the farm, just working, doing yard work, whatever I can do to help, around the house and working. That's pretty much it.
As a youngster, did you drink or do drugs at all?
No, sir, I didn't start doing no drugs till like in my teen years, about 15.
When did you first start using?
Smoked a little marijuana.
Okay. And what did you progress to, if anything, after smoking marijuana at 15?
I just every now and then somebody would, give me something to smoke. We smoke with them. And then we started drinking a little bit, on weekends or something like that.
How about other drugs? Cocaine? You ever use cocaine?
No, sir.
So strictly marijuana and alcohol?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
How often were you smoking marijuana?
Well, when I can get around it, I would smoke it with my uncles,
How often were you drinking?
On weekends. I drink on weekends.
And Mr. Lavalais, it's my understanding this is your first offense.
Yes, sir. Well, I had a speeding ticket.
Well, first serious offense, okay?
Yes, sir.
So tell me, how does a 19-year-old young man get recruited to kill someone for money? Tell me about that.
Sir, if I really could really answer that truly, I don't really know where that began at, but I think it started out as working for George Paul Smith and just working and every day he had some kind of little game he played, or I called it a game because he was, I guess, molding me, or
How long did you work for him?
I started working for his dad first. I was about 10, 11 years old. We used to pick pecans on their property. And then my dad, he ended up came into the play. My dad bought some property from his dad. And we cut their grass, cleaned their swimming pool, and did their flower beds and things like that. And they own a whole bunch of property, cattle, and things, so forth.
Now you said he started out by doing little games and such. What do you mean by that? Did he
We would go
games
we
or what?
we would go in the woods and shoot cans. We would go in the woods and shoot squirrels, and, you know, just hang out with him every day. He would come get me after work. He would come get me and hang out with him.
How was it that he broached the idea of you killing his wife?
He asked me one day if I could kill somebody, and
General conversation or specifically his wife?
general conversation. And I said, bro, I said I could, you know, just mouthing off, I guess. I called it, you know. And then it went away, and then he came back later and brought it again. And then it kind of went away. And then one day, which was February 12th, 1985, that's when he approached.
And tell me what happened. Tell me what you did.
I went, I got to work that morning. I went to work that morning.
Now, he promised you $50,000.
Yes, sir. He said he would pay me,
Or anything at that point?
sir.
Did he actually pay you anything up front?
Yeah, he gave me money here and there, you know. Yes, sir, he did.
So what did you do? Did you agree to do that?
Yes, sir, I agreed. And well, that day when he came and handed me that gun, and he said, go in and ask for a flashlight. So I went in and asked for a flashlight. And when she opened the door, I walked in and shot her, and I left. And
You know, I know you've had a lot of time to think about this.
yes, sir, I had.
Tell me as best you can recall, I mean, what was going on in your mind as a 19-year-old? Tell me why you would agree to do something.
Scared, fear, pressure. It's just ignorance on my part at that time.
Did he have
And
any sort of control over you or something?
well, I don't know. I guess he owned everything my family owned. Everything that was for my family was for his family. The house we were living in, the property we had, we owned. The crawfish pond, my grandfather crawfish for his dad. The truck my dad probably was driving at that time, he owed money to him for that. You know, just now that I got older, I learned my family really was in debt to him, to his family. My
Well,
mother worked for him as well.
let's go back to the day that this occurred. Now, did he give you a gun? Did he give you the gun to use?
Yes, sir.
He told you to go and ask for a flashlight.
Yes, sir.
Tell me exactly what happened when you went.
I went in, I went to the door, I knocked on the door, I asked for a flashlight. When she said, she turned to go get the flashlight. I walked in and behind her and shot her and left and closed the door and left behind. I
How many-
shot her till she dropped and then I left.
How many times did you shoot?
I shot 4 or 5 times, I guess. I shot until she fell and then I left.
What did you do after that? Where did you go after that?
I went to this, it was, he left to go bring the kids to school. So I had a tractor, I was on a tractor, I rode to this little place where we met up every day, where we kept like, the diesel and, you know, filled the tractors up and stored all the tractors and stuff like that. I drove over there, it was cold that morning, February on the 12th. I drove over there and when, I got there, he made it there about that time. He takes the gun and, he, you know, we go on to Cottonport like we're supposed to go. And on the way there, he throws the gun out the window somewhere along the road.
And you weren't arrested for what, 5 years after that?
It was more like about 7 years.
7 years?
Yes, sir.
92, I think, is when you were
Yes,
arrested.
sir. Yes, sir.
So tell me what did you do from 1985 till the time you were arrested? Let's talk about that time frame.
From 1985, I lived in Bunkie at the time. And
Still working?
I still work for him. He passed by, he came by the house every day, he checked on me 2 or 3 times a day. I went to work. Even if I was like late for work, he was like, call me on, I had a radio in my truck and all that. He would call on the radio to make sure I was on time. He wanted to keep me close around him. So, you know, it's like watching out so I don't mess up. And
Time, did the police ever come and talk to you?
yes, sir, they did. They talked to me like when it first happened.
Did they suspect you? Did they question you as if you were a suspect?
They questioned me. They did everything. They questioned me and everything.
It's my understanding that in 1992, they intercepted a letter that he had sent to you about trying to do away with a witness that was going to be testifying against him in trouble. Tell me a little bit about that. Had y'all talked about that before?
The letter, I had never seen. I didn't see the letter until I went to. They called me from. I was living in Dallas at the time. They called me from Dallas.
Yeah.
And the FBI called me from Dallas, and they brought me to this place, and we talked about. But they never showed me that they had a letter until like, you know, later.
What were you doing in Dallas? Were you living in Dallas at the time?
Yes, sir. I left and went to Dallas.
And when did you leave? When did you ultimately get away from Mr. Smith and move to Dallas?
I left and went to Dallas, and when I got to Dallas, my uncle helped me. You know, I stayed with my uncle.
And about what time frame is that?
That was like probably 85, the end of 85, 86, somewhere.
Did Mr. Smith continue to try to keep you close, as you said?
He would send family members and all that to try to find out where I was at in Texas and all that.
Did you have contact, very much contact with him between 85 and 92 at the time you were actually arrested?
He knew where I lived, everything. He found out where I lived through my uncle that's deceased now. Found
Let's
out
talk about how you got arrested. Tell me what happened and how they come get you.
where they asked me to come to Texas, to come to Louisiana. So I came.
Maybe FBI?
The FBI did.
Okay, go ahead.
I came to Louisiana and went to Lafayette, and they approached me and then they started talking about the letter and what the contents of the letter, why the death penalty and all that. And I think I went home like that day or the night. And then the next day I came back, another conversation, and that's when I confessed to the crime.
And you explained to them what you did and how you did it and why you did it?
Yes, sir.
And were you then arrested and put in custody?
Sir,
That's when you were arrested and placed in custody?
yes, sir. That
And
was,
you've been in prison since then, 92?
yes, sir. That was April 12th, 92, somewhere in there. I think that's when it was.
Let's talk a little bit about, you've been, in prison for 31 years.
Sir.
Tell me, what sort of programs you've taken, that have been, important to you to perhaps get you to really understand the significance of what you did and maybe why even you did it? What can you tell me? What programs do you think have been very helpful to you?
Well, I can name two that was very instrumental in my life and really changed me to understand. I always knew there was a purpose, but I didn't understand how to deal with what I went through, my crime, how to really deal with what I needed to grow, what I needed to understand everything that was going on in my life at the time, because I was like lost. And one day I come in from work and I saw something on the board said hospice volunteer. So it stuck out. I went to lunch and I come back in, and every time when I passed by it caught me again. So I asked one of the guys what was hospice, and he explained. He said that's taking care of the illness, the sick people, and all that.
We're gonna talk about your work in hospice in just a bit. I've seen it, and we'll talk about that. I guess what I'd like to know about your process and your thought process is, your crime, even though you were only 19 years old, a murder for hire, so to speak, is not like a crime of passion or a manslaughter or something like that. I mean, that was that's a very cold-blooded sort of a crime. Did you know his wife?
Yes, sir, I did.
Did you get along with her? I mean, was she?
She was a very nice lady and helped everybody. She came to and loved everybody that she came to know. And Sheila was special, I would say.
And what have you thought about? Why is it you did that? I mean, what can you tell us today that changed in you? We're going to talk about hospice and we're going to talk about some of those things, but what in you, as you look back on what you did, how have you been able to process that and forgive yourself?
Regrets, remorse for what happened. Also, thinking about that, some of the classes that I participated in, like victim awareness.
Talk about some of those for me. The victim awareness.
Victim awareness. I not only victim awareness helped me to grow into really grow in what I learned in victim awareness, because it helped me to understand that when you do something, there's not just one victim. You make a lot of victims. My wife, my kids, Sheila's family, Sheila's brother, her kids. I left them without a mother. It's it's so much, so many victims you make, and what you put your family through and her family went through by the loss, it made a whole lot of victims and I'm just I'm glad that I was afforded that opportunity to learn more about that.
What would you say to her family if you had an opportunity to talk?
I apologize for that day, that February 12th, for taking the life of Sheila Lamorne Smith, who was very special. And if she could live today in me, I would like that light to shine some kind of way, because she was a beautiful person. And I want to always remember that she was a beautiful face, not what I allowed myself to become to do that.
Let's talk a little bit about your hospice work. When did you get involved with hospice? When did you start out with hospice?
I got in the hospice about like 2003, 2001.
And I think you mentioned you saw some signs that talked about.
Yes, sir.
Tell me how you got interested in it. Tell me about your process going through hospice and what it's meant to you.
Hospice has gave me a lot of helped me become a man, because now I'm allowing myself to see the gift of life is so precious, and helping people through a process that I never knew was so special at that time. And guys used to tell me, you go in the hospice, you're gonna clean up another man. I don't even see it as another man. I see it as a precious human being going through a stage in his life that I want to help. And it's not just going to the hospital, it's not just hospice. Hospice is all over. In my dorm where I live at, on the walk, guys that needs help, older guys that's, can't shower themselves. It's just different things as that nature, sir.
Are you still working with hospice today?
Yes, sir.
You've been outside the prison walls with hospice, haven't you?
Sir.
You've been outside of the prison walls with hospice, is that right?
Yes, sir. I've spoke to different groups, tours, and I've been to New Orleans for the accept awards for hospice on behalf of Warden Burl King.
And what has that done for you? How has that made your life more rich and perhaps understood?
It's remorse, redemption for my wrong, which I never can make that right. But giving back to others, that's what I tend to try to do, the rest of my life.
I have read all of the letters and all of the accomplishments that you've done in hospice.
Yes, sir.
That is certainly in the record, and something I know is very, very important. And it's certainly something that really gives back to the community. Let's talk a little bit about, and I'll let you talk about hospice more, and I think we'll have probably some people talking more about hospice. Let's talk about some of the other things that you've done. What about your vocational work? You've done some welding.
Yes, sir.
Tell me about that.
I learned to weld since I've been here. I went to welding school. I learned to weld here, do numerous of projects here. I also learned fabricating. I also taught welding school for about 3.5 years to young kids that was coming in to Angola, hoping that, they would go out there and do the right thing.
Did you get your GED?
I was in school, going to night school. I volunteered to go to night school to get up to par for the GED. And I took a high set, which they call it a GED, like 2010 or somewhere in there. I'm not sure exactly when. But I stayed up all night working on a project, and they popped in and said, "You're taking a test today." I almost got the test, and then kind of, went around here and then, and I never went back until later. Back started the school again, and then the pandemic showed up, and then I got moved around, and then I started back, enrolled again for the night school to try to get back in to take a higher set again. And they moved us again because there was the changing of the prison. Because we worked outside the gate, they moved the ones that worked outside, they moved us to a different area. So what I did, I enrolled in there to try to get their GED, because every time you move somewhere, you got to restart that process again. So I signed up again, and they allowed me to take the TAID test again to try to get back in.
How long have you been a Class A trustee?
Almost 20 years, sir.
Now, in 30 years, you've had 11 write-ups. Is that right? When was your last write-up? Remember?
My last write-up for having cigars on the rodeo ground at work.
How long ago was that? Do you remember?
2017, sir.
Now, you do, I do want to put in the record, although there's nothing you can do about this, you do have a law enforcement opposition. But what you do have that is oftentimes we don't see is the family victim supports you today. And that says a lot. Warden, what can you tell us about Mr. Lavalais?
I can tell you that Mr. Lavalais has been a model offender. I mean, at the age of 19, being groomed by somebody and, money being present in a situation. I mean, I can see how he easily did this, but, being here and seeing Mr. Lavalais do his work in hospice, and also he volunteers for Point Lookout when we have to bury somebody. Often these offenders, he don't even know, or they family, he don't even know. I think it's amazing the thing that he do. And one of the things that I do know that he participated in the offender victim dialogue, and he had a chance to sit down and talk to one of the victim sisters, I think, about the crime, and they understood the reason why he did it. So I think that speaks volumes when you said that the victim family was unopposed to it. So I really think he's ready to go back into society, and I don't think he's the same Albert Lavalais he was when he was 19.
Thank you, Warden. Comments. That's all.
I don't see any other questions, so we'll hear from those who are here in support. Could we first hear from either Albert or Patrice Lavalais?
Yes, ma'am.
Go ahead, sir. What would you like us to know?
I would like you to know that that my father has always been a father to me. Growing up without one or that father figure, but my uncles played a huge role in that. Just my work ethic and everything that I'm able to accomplish. Every time when I feel like I want to give up, it's like he feels that. He calls me and he calls and check up on the girls. We have 5 daughters that I would love for him to be able to see every day. But I mean, just those motivational speeches for someone that has been incarcerated and not able to play a role in this outside society, and still be able to give that positive energy and to be able to push me to the next level. And every time when I feel like I want to give up, I think about his words, and it just want to make me strive for excellence. That being said, I'm an executive chef partner now. I actually had dropped out of school when I was in 11th grade. I ended up going back and getting a high school diploma, a culinary degree, and I'm still furthering my education. My wife of 14 years, she met my dad and fell in love with him, and just his positive energy, you know, how he always is just being selfless about anything, you know. He would give you the shirt off his back, and it doesn't mean it doesn't matter if he had to walk through the cold and the rain in order for him to be able to get home. Long as he know that you're warm and safe, you know, I think that speaks volumes. And I definitely think that, you know, he'll be able to be able to make it in this society that we have these days. And you have a lot of support that's backing. You know, we already told him any and everything that he needs, he has it. You know, and I just want to be able to see him and hold him and, you know, have a real conversation with my father, and, you know, it not be timed, and, you know, or we can't get too close or whatever case may be. And, you know, I pray that you guys make the right decision. And I swear to you guys that he will not let you down, because he have a strong support around him and a lot of love around him in all his grandkids, that they'll make sure that he succeeds.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much. Mr. Champagne? Yes, please.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of Albert Lavalais. I met Albert Lavalais back in 2001. I met him during the hearing. Howard Sheriff Howard Rang. I had contacted him, but state police. Communicated with him by mail, and then I became his spiritual advisor in 2003 or 2003. So I've known him for about 22 years. So I've walked with him through a lot of the process of the 31 years in prison, 22 of those, and of course rehashing that terrible moment when killed Sheila, and helping him with forgiveness. We walked through that. He always, as became Catholic in prison, and we would have opportunity for the sacrament when I was visiting with him, and always dealing with the remorse, helping to forgive himself, to ask for forgiveness, and then to be able to forgive others in prison, because we obviously cross one another in our daily life, certainly prison. So Albert, in the 20 years that I've known, has made tremendous progress. Always think about the penal system is it's got a triple goal: punitive, you got to punish, you can't actually have consequences. You never bring that life back, but there's consequences. And his over 30 years in prison, he's accepted. Punitive stuff doesn't help unless a person discloses receiving. He has protect society. We lock people up because it's an injustice. People are dangerous to society, and the terrible thing that happened, and society has been protected. But I can tell you, in my encounters with him, prepared to offer him housing and work next to me. We have nuns, I have people, young kids and stuff, and I trust him with my life. I trust him with them, and I can certainly have a great deal of confidence that he's not going to break parole, he's not going to do any quarantine from now on. And then thirdly, rehabilitation. We try to rehabilitate. We try to make people better. And Howard became a better father by being in prison. I used to proofread his letters to Ariel and give him advice. And he's saving money, he's working at night, collecting the money to send him home for their high school graduation prom, doing things. He did things for the church. We built the church in 2008. He made the kneelers. He told me he in the scriptures he had to kneel, not to lay in bed with present to kneel. But he progressed into his rehabilitation. Came to know right and wrong. He came to know the dignity of human life with hospice, and it continued to bring back the remorse of what he did, and to try to make it back a character. So another great deal of sacrifice he did in taking care of his patients. When I go see him, a lot of times it's a long delay, an hour, sometimes 2 hours, because he's at the hospital. It collected some money, went by from toothpaste, was bathing them, helping them, bringing them full bar. But so if he's granted parole, which I 100% support, I know on both sides of the story, obviously, but people do change, people do get better, and I know he's done a great deal of good in prison, but I'd love to see that spot taken by somebody that can have the same results, and I'd be willing to work with them down the stretch, because I think we do a tremendous amount of good for us in the people. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it. The parole project, please, if I could get.
Yeah, good afternoon. Kerry Myers with Louisiana Parole Project. This is maybe the most incredible story of tragedy and redemption that maybe I've ever encountered. And as this board has seen a lot of hearings, and so have I. What I can tell you, and I know Mr. Simone will talk about that, but I can tell you the Albert Lavalais, that Parole Project is willing to and ready to assist. We hope that Albert is granted today and comes into our program because we want to be able to offer things that we do, the mentors, the mentorship, the coaching, the services to help him through his transition. I know Albert personally. I've known him for a very long time. I know this is probably a little bit off of what I would normally say, but this Albert's, what you see here is the sincerity, the character is as real as I've ever seen. Albert has been nothing but a life of service while he's been incarcerated. Anytime that someone has needed Albert to help them, he does. That's evidenced by his work in hospice. That's evidenced by his work as a welder, giving his time and talents by teaching, giving his time and talents by building things to support good causes. He's always given his time and talents to do something worthwhile. This is the first felony offense Albert ever committed. And then he lived a life where he married and had raised a family, had children, and it caught up with him. But it goes to show, I think, his mentality, the totality of him as a person, coerced into an act. He still led a life that was worthy and raised children and is still married to the same woman after more than 35 years. We would love to have Albert in our program. I can tell you, as Albert's as a friend, and I guess I'm again probably crossing the line a little bit here. I would ask this board to look at Albert as the person sitting in front of you here, as quality of a person as I met in Angola, and ask this board to grant his clemency request today.
Great, thank you. All right, I'd like to ask Albert if he has a statement to make before we turn it over to his attorneys. Albert, is there anything you want to say to the board?
Yes, ma'am. I would like to read a letter that I wrote, if I may read it.
Sure, go ahead.
To you, ma'am, sir. It says, my name is Albert Lavalais. Today, and for many years, I've lived with the deep regret and remorse for taking the life of Sheila Smith, who was a mother of three, a sister, an aunt, a daughter, and a friend to so many. When I truly started to understand the magnitude of not just the crime I committed, but how many other people it affected close to Sheila that loved her, the shame, the embarrassment, and the remorse began to run deeper inside of me. I understand my action can never be undone. The only thing I've known to do is to show the sorrows I harbored by doing everything I can each day to show I have truly changed. And the person I look at today is a man that remembers have deserving the life was what I took. I allowed the power of that truth to help become, because I have hurt them enough. while incarcerated, I have submerged myself in hospice program. I have involved myself in this, especially more than other things. I've realized that all of these years I've been subconsciously trying to apologize to Sheila for what I did by believing she sees me helping others and respecting their trust. I failed her trust, I failed her trust. She allowed me as someone who meant her no harm. And I will forever hold debt to that because life is a gift that I have not the right to take. I just pray that I can forever allow Sheila's light to shine. Humbly and respectfully, Albert Lavalais.
Thank you, Mr. Lavalais. We'll have to turn it over.
Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Good afternoon.
It's cold, isn't
Yeah,
it?
sorry.
Is there any better?
This is good. No, we hear.
I'm Susan Seymour, appearing on behalf of our Lavalais, whom I have known. And I am sorry, I should have emotional. I have represented Albert and been in continual contact with him since August of 1998. This August will be 25 years. I've watched Albert grow, mature, and become the wise, caring, compassionate man he is today. As you have heard, Albert takes complete responsibility for his crime. He feels tremendous remorse, and he always will. He knows he can never take back what he did, and the pain and loss of Sheila Smith family, as well as his own family. In fact, because of that, the pain he caused, Albert did not want to file an application unless Sheila's family would not object to it. For all of these reasons, there are things Albert would not say to you, but I will. Albert shot and killed Sheila Smith because her husband Joey Smith wanted him to. Albert was completely under Joey Smith's thumb. Although there was a contract ruling, the fact that Joey offered money to Albert actually had very little, if any, connection to why Albert did what he did. Much bigger factors were the fact that Albert was 19 years old, illiterate, had a 5th grade education, and a brain that wasn't fully formed. He had very poor decision making. Further, Albert had worked for Joey since he was 11 years old and was groomed by Joey Smith to do whatever Smith wanted. Sadly, Albert didn't recognize the manipulation. He thought Joey Smith was his best friend, like a godfather to him. In fact, both Albert and his parents were dependent on the Smith family and Joey Smith for their livelihood and even for their home, because it was on Smith land and owned by the Smiths. Because of all these factors, Albert didn't know how to tell Joey Smith no. I say none of this to excuse Albert's actions or lessen his responsibility for the crime, but to explain perhaps his mentality when the crime was committed, and to assure the board that what Albert did would never happen again. Albert's no longer immature, illiterate, or capable of being manipulated to do something against his strong Christian morals. During his 31 years of incarceration, Albert's focus has been on helping others and making himself a better man. The kind of man Albert is can actually be seen in how he's chosen to help other people. It takes a special person to do hospice work. And Albert has done it for more than 20 years, and he excels at it. Albert's also excelled as a mentor to other inmates. He's taught many inmates how to weld. He's counseled many others, including men on death row. He's trained many of the inmate hospice volunteers. He's cooked countless meals for other inmates, often with food he grew himself. Basically, if Albert can help, he will. As you've heard, Albert's worked very hard on improving himself in Angola, and he's taken a numerous amount of courses. I won't tell them all to you. He also, though, completed a job skills training program. He's been a certified welder since 2007. He's in the process of finally getting his GED. He has a very low risk assessment number, a good record. In short, Albert has done everything he needs to do in Angola to make himself capable of being released and returned to society. Albert has been rehabilitated in the true sense of the word. Significantly, if he is granted clemency, he has the support and assistance of the parole project, as well as strong family support, as you've seen. Albert has both in-state and out-of-state residence and employment agreements, and he would be happy to be guided by the board and or the parole project as to what's most appropriate for him at this time. Karen, his wife of 38 years, has already made it clear that if Albert's granted clemency, she's going to live wherever he lives. Last October, Albert was diagnosed with prostate cancer. And he's faced his cancer, the treatment, and the current wait to see if the treatment has been successful with faith and positivity. This also shows who Albert is today. As does the fact that Albert took his medical time off of work to work on his programs. For all of these reasons, and the others you have heard here today and seen in his record, we respectfully ask that the board grant Albert's application for clemency, commute his sentence to 16 years, and make him immediately parole eligible. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. I can be prepared to vote. Mr. Mirabella?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Mr. Lavalais, it was a
Yes, sir.
pleasure to meet with you today.
Same to you, sir.
Your honesty
Sure.
and the way you were forthcoming with us today. This is a tragedy. No question about that. You've explained to us what happened, how it happened. You were 19 years old. I have to say that from what I've seen and from what I've read, I have to agree with Ms. Seaman. You're under the control. That had a lot to do. That doesn't excuse what you did, but it certainly does, at least in my opinion, give me some understanding as to why a 19-year-old young man would do something like that. You have an excellent prison record. You have good comments from the warden. You have been a trustee for a long time. You've got an excellent transition plan. Louisiana Parole Project does an excellent job for us and for the inmates that come before us. Vocational skills, and most importantly to me, your hospice.
Yes, sir.
That is just something that I know how difficult that is, and I know how important that is for prisoners. Based upon all of those things, my recommendation, my vote would be to recommend the government that you commute your sentence to 60 years. Good luck to you, sir. I'm just one of 4 votes.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Freeman?
Mr. Lavalais, you're kind of like a breath of fresh air for us. Sitting up here, your case was relatively easy for me to decide. And I agree with Mr. Marabella. I agree with everything he said, and I vote to commute your sentence for 60 years.
Thank you, sir.
My vote is the same for the same reasons. Good luck to you, Mr. Lavalais.
Thank you, ma'am.
Mr. Lavalais, my vote is also the same for the reasons that have already been stated. I won't go over it again. So you've received a unanimous vote today to make the recommendation that your sentence be commuted to 60 years. Good luck to you, sir.
Good luck.
Thank you, ma'am. Y'all have a blessed.
Okay, so let's unpack this, and there is a lot to unpack. There's a lot of information that we can go through or will go through. Now, do remember this is a commutation, so the governor's going to have to sign it. Then he's going to have a parole hearing, and only at that point can he get out. Although I would say the likelihood is probably very high. There's no one here. There's no victim opposition at all. Now, the question, if you want to jump into, like, you know, it felt from the beginning to me like Mr. Marabella's interview style was almost like he was feeding into the storyline of you were 19 and even the warden said the words, he was groomed. So like the whole storyline was really fed from all sides into the beginning that he was this 19-year-old influential boy who was groomed by this man who had complete power and control, not just over him, but over his family. Everything that they did and owned and operated on belonged to this man. And because of that, he was easily manipulated into taking out his wife. He had no record prior, and then even no record after. Like he went on with his life and raised a family. Now, there were certain things that I found out in researching, which we'll go over soon, which he was paid $10,000. So when they said, he made it sound like, oh, it was a few dollars, you know, it was $10,000, which to him in the life that he grew, you know, in 1985, it's a lot of money. It would have been life-changing money for him. So he didn't get the whole $50,000 he was supposed to get that he was promised. There was a $500,000 life insurance policy, of course, but he did get paid. It was, they say it's equivalent here to $28,000, but I never understood these equivalent things. It's not, you got to take in more than just inflation. Like $10,000 in 1985 could buy you so much more than $28,000 could buy you today, I would argue. What do I know? Okay, so let's jump in with there's 3 documents we're going to look at, and we'll be here a little while. We're not going to have a hearing after this. This is going to be more one of those. I don't think we'll have a hearing after this. This is going to be more one of those, let's jump into all the details and go through this together. And I'm sorry if it's not your thing. Let me know in the comment section. I don't do it that often where I go into all the details. I usually breathe through it, but I figured this one we can kind of try to figure out. Remember, he was given the DEATH sentence, which is pretty mind-blowing. So he goes from death row. I know I just said it now, but whatever. Goes from death row, gets that reversed, to then life without parole, and then now gets that commuted, and then can be free. We have seen this happen in Louisiana multiple times, which is always, in my opinion, should be the argument. If you are having an argument with someone about, well, why have the death sentence? Just give them life. I think the best argument for that is to fall back on and say, yeah, And you know what happens next? And here's how many times it happens. And it actually does happen quite a bit. And for me, that would be my argument if you're that I would face, which is you take someone off of death row, put them on life. The next step is getting a commuted sentence. Should this have been a death sentence? It's mind-boggling to me, but a jury recommended it. It wasn't even a judge giving this. A jury had to say that that's what he should get, and that's what they gave him. Now, there's a lot that happened. It took a long time till he got caught, and there was a lot involved. And I don't know if it's so, to me, it's hard to say that he was just so, under this man's spell and manipulated and groomed. When I look at it, he was a 19-year-old man. He was the oldest of like 9 kids. He never had a criminal record, and he was paid 10 grand cash. Like, to me, it doesn't seem like pure manipulation to me and grooming. It seems like someone who made a decision, but that's just me. Now, I'd argue, hey, without him involved, wouldn't he have done it? No, but and we can. The more we do, we can come up to different conclusions, maybe. But I don't know. To me, it felt a little bit of the strong side of the poor me. I mean, he wasn't 15; he was 19. Okay, so a jury returned unanimous guilty verdict July 4th. Might have been a sentence of life in prison, hard labor. Okay, so this is the. Let me make sure I have the right order. I hope I do. On February 12th, 1985, Sheila Lemoyne Smith, the wife of the defendant George Paul Smith. So this is actually the version from George Paul Smith, was shot to death in their home located in Whiteville, Louisiana, at approximately 7:30 a.m. on the morning of February 12th. Shortly before it happened, Smith drove the couple's 2 daughters, Jill and Kristen, to school bus stop. Smith was also accompanied by his youngest son, a toddler. This guy's a sicko. He takes the life of a mom of 2 girls in element and a toddler. He takes their mom away from them. I'm not talking about the man we just saw. I'm talking about the man who paid him to do it. It's like, how can you do that? I mean, you got to be a sociopath. I mean, there's just no way to take a mom away from your babies. Unbelievable. But also, that's what he did. He's a 19-year-old man. He knew that he was taking a mother away from their babies. The whole groom thing is just too convenient for me. Smith also accompanied by his youngest son, George Jr. Okay. After dropping his daughters off at the bus stop, Smith attended to some errands before returning home. Remember, this is the man who paid him. Sheila's body was found by Smith on the floor of the laundry room upon his return. She was wearing a robe with no undergarments, a towel around her head, a diamond ring, and necklace. So apparently they did not take the diamond ring and necklace, which would have been an obvious mistake that this wasn't a robbery gone wrong, right? Apparently, she had taken a shower just prior to her red room. On the floor next to her body, investigators discovered a large flashlight. There was no evidence of forced entry into the home. It was determined that Sheila sustained 5 gunshot wounds, 1 to the chest and 4 to the face. I mean, this guy straight up made sure it was done. The only item reported missing were the contents of a jewelry box belonging to Sheila located in the master bathroom. Although police questioned Smith extensively following the red rum, there was no viable evidence linking him to the crime. For more than 7 years, Sheila Lemoyne Smith's case remained unsolved. A break in the case came March 1992. At that time, Smith was incarcerated, so now he got locked up and awaiting trial on a federal court of drug charges. So he did all of that just to get locked up on Fed drug charges, of which he has since been convicted. So since the time of this writing in 1996, he'd been convicted of it. Can you imagine? Oh man, he took that 500K and he just blew it all away, huh? He attempted to send 2 letters to Albert. So from jail, where he was awaiting trial, he attempted to send 2 letters to Albert, who at the time of Sheila's murder was employed as a farmhand by Smith. So he's still employed by Smith. After reading the letters, federal law enforcement officials contacted Detective Greensbury. How dumb can people get? He writes a letter knowing that the letter could be intercepted and probably will be. How dumb. I mean, it's just like strange, man. People are just not smart. After reviewing Smith's letters, Spry questioned about the red rum. On April 14, 1992, Spryer picked up Lavalais at the Cottonport home and transported him to Louisiana State Police Headquarters at Baton Rouge. On that morning, Albert confessed, and he confessed that quickly. Look at that. That didn't take him long at all. Confessed to, little did he know that confessing would give him the penalty that would unlife himself. He just like gave it all up, like no plea deal, no. I mean, he could have just gotten an attorney and that would have been it, but no, just go in and just confess to them. He claimed that Smith offered him money to commit red rum. In addition, he revealed pertinent information about the victim, the murder scene. Oh gosh, I said it again. Whatever. I should just give up. Like YouTube, it doesn't make a difference what you say on YouTube. Like literally, I've been watching YouTube videos about the algorithm and demonetization words, and it is broken. It is. I mean, we all knew that already, but like I've seen like YouTubers with 10 million subscribers who have a personal concierge YouTube person, and when their video gets demonetized, they'll call them and speak to a human, and the human will then tell them what it was, and then they're nice enough to show it to us, and it's nothing. It literally is like the compound of a word in a certain language could mean this, and that's why it was demonetized. I'm not joking. So whatever, I'll just stop caring. I digress. His confession was videotaped on the tape. He claimed that Smith offered him money to commit murder. In addition, Lavalais revealed pertinent information about the victim, the murder scene, the stolen jewelry, and the murder weapon. I just said it 3 times. Good. Although the stolen jewelry was recovered, the weapon was never found. Isn't that interesting that the jewelry was recovered? Like he didn't, and this is part of it. It's like he took jewelry, but it seems that they never recovered. I mean, they never sold it. They never. I don't understand. I guess they're afraid of getting caught. But on April 28, 1992, Parish Grand Jury charged Smith with a bill of indictment with first degree. Smith appeared in court for arraignment and entered a plea of not guilty. Also indicted was the man, the groomer, an alleged trigger. Was Albert Lavalais, the alleged trigger man. The state asserted that Smith agreed to pay him $50,000 in return for murder of Smith's wife, and that Smith's motive for the murder was the collection of $500,000 in life insurance and proceeds. The Lavalais and Smith's trial were severed in September 1993. Albert was found guilty of Sheila Smith and sentenced to death, and is currently on death row. Well, at the time of this reading, he is currently commuted to be set free. So pretty amazing what can happen in 10 years would be 06, 30 something years, I guess. Time flies, huh? The Louisiana Supreme Court. Remember, I know this could have been confusing, but this is about Steve Smith. That probably confused a lot of us, right? In June 1995, Smith was brought to trial. Venue for jury selection was moved to a different parish after jury selection was transferred. For trial, Smith's trial by jury commenced. This was all the way now in 1995. The jury returned a unanimous verdict of guilty as charged. Murder for hire of his wife, Sheila Lemoyne. Smith timely filed motion for a new trial, which subsequently denied. He was sentenced to life. Isn't it interesting that he gets life, the one who orders it, but the one who does it got the death penalty? He now appeals conviction, alleging that 21 signed error, blah, blah, blah. And I tried to find out if he's still alive or not, but I couldn't find that information. Can you imagine now he's rotting away all because he thought that he should write to a letter? Like, how dumb are you? Moron. Take his mother's kids just so you can have some money, just so you can get locked up a few years anyways. Like, you fool. You deserve every second of your misery. It's long stuff, but anyways, we can go now to the man of the hour, Alberte E. Lavalais. I know we just heard it 1,000 times, but so here they state on the morning of February 12, 1985, Sheila Lemoyne Smith was found red-rummed in the utility room at her home in a rural part, and then basically it's a copy-paste of what they wrote. Soon after the red room of Landry Paris Smith, deputies interviewed the defendant who was employed by the victim's husband, George Paul Joey Smith, to do farm work and assist in the nursery, located some 30 yards from the residence of the murder occurred. The defendant was not arrested at this time. Around the time of the homicide, a violent robbery had taken place near the Smith's residence. Oh, that's interesting. So there was a violent robbery near them. Those three individuals, James Washington, Rodney Gillespie, and Joseph Jenkins, were arrested for this robbery and pled guilty. That's interesting. They could have gone away with it, and these guys could have gotten the hit based upon the information, except not taking her diamond ring is strange, but they did take the jewelry, so maybe they argued they just forgot. They got nervous, spooked. Based upon the information, Deputy Robert, Chief Deputy Herman, the victim's father, Parrish became interested in a possible connection with the Smiths murder. In September 1985, Lemoyne and Venable tape recorded an interview with Washington in which he implicated himself and Gillespie in the murder of Sheila Smith. However, Washington subsequently recanted his confession, and two grand juries failed to indict Washington. Wow, I missed this part. It just blows my mind. So they did this violent robbery. Everyone's like, come on, they obviously are guilty of this crime. He confesses, which is just more to that fact that people do confess when they're not guilty of crimes, which is something I can never understand, but we, I guess, don't need to understand it. It is true. People do it for whatever reason. And then he recanted. And surprisingly, a jury didn't indict them, which I just don't know. You would think that a jury would have indicted him. And that's it. They would have gotten away with it. 3 people would have been locked up for a crime they did not commit, which is incredible. In March 1992, FBI agents learned of a letter. So yeah, they had no idea. Like, he really had gotten away with it. They probably all thought that it was these 3 guys that were guilty of the crime. And I have a Um, so, yeah, so they probably were that close to getting away with it. And March 1992, FBI agents learned that the letter allegedly written by Joey Smith, no defendant at the time, Smith was in jail. Hold on one second. Let me just close the door. Okay, sorry about that. In March 1992, FBI, this was that letter we were talking about. So in this letter, he basically wrote him again because he wanted him to take care of someone that was involved in his other case with the, and which is just so crazy. So in March, FBI just learned of a letter written by Joey Smith, the defendant. At the time, Smith was in jail awaiting trial for his drug charges, narcotics charges. Sorry, YouTube. The letter threatened to expose the defendant. The letter threatened the defendant, "You're gonna get this penalty unless he arranged for the temporary absence of a witness who was to testify against Smith in federal court." So now he wanted his I'm trying to think of the word, his puppet, because he's supposedly a puppet master, to go and get rid of someone else against Smith. The FBI testing established that the letter was in Smith's handwriting and bore his fingerprints. As a result of the letter, the defendant was called in for questioning. In interviews with deputies on April 12th and 13th, 1992, defendant began detailing his part in the Red Room. Although asserting a secondary role, he nevertheless admitted that he procured the weapon and received $10,000 of a promised $50,000 in exchange for the Smith alibi. Can you imagine how he's so? It's all. I can never get over it. You did this crime. Now you're by detectives. You're talking to them. All he had to do was lawyer up, and that would have been it. There would have been nothing. He would have never spent the rest of his life rotting away in prison. But he just starts telling them everything. And the crazy thing about it is he confesses, and he still gets the ultimate penalty. He still gets the ultimate penalty. He got nothing out of his confession. He got nothing. They gave him nothing. Because he just gave it all up. Man. And who knows what they told him in that confession? They probably told him so many things. They probably said, "Oh, they'll take it easy on you. You were tricked. Poor you. You had no choice. Don't worry. Just tell us. We'll take it." And then next thing you know, he's on death row. Defendant then agreed to a polygraph exam, which would be videotaped. Man, we should get this videotape footage, although it's probably like watching something out of a potato, but still. On April 14, 1992, defendant accompanied the deputies to Baton Rouge, where the polygraph examination was to be conducted. And as you all know how I feel about polygraphs, I think they're jokes, but that's besides the point. During the pre-examination interview, defendants first maintained his story. Under further questioning, however, he identified himself as the trigger man. So he hadn't yet. And then really the only good thing about lie detectors, in my opinion, is the person giving the lie detector. If the person giving the lie detector is really good at getting someone to talk, because they'll be like, no, you're being deceptive. You know, like the way that they do that, that's how a lie detector can work, but it would never benefit the person taking its best interest. And even the inventor of the lie detector denounced it. So if you need anything more than that, that's That was enough for me when I heard that the inventor denounced it, called it more or less a gimmick. Okay, so who was hired by Smith for $50,000, of which $10,000 had been paid. So when he said, "Oh, a little bit of money," no, he was paid $10,000. Okay. Furthermore, the defendant directed the deputy to the spot where he had buried the jewelry, but the weapon was never recovered. And this is pretty incredible. So he buried the jewelry and waited all those years, never took the jewelry. I mean, what does that tell you about someone? And by the way, the one who groomed him, Mr. Smith, he told him, I forget where I read it in one of these things, he told him, get rid of the jewelry, get rid of it, make it disappear. And he did not listen to the man that he was groomed by. No, he buried it because he thought one day he'll sell it. So if that doesn't tell you something, in my opinion, that does, because it just does. You know, you're not under his spell enough. You're still thinking greed. So the whole picture they painted of him not even caring about the money when it was 10 grand and, you know, all those little things, it's just not a fully true picture, in my opinion. Facts are facts here. Defendant contends that the letter that Smith wrote him from prison while awaiting trial, federal charges, was hearsay and improperly admitted at trial. Defendant argues the letter was not admissible as good. How is a letter hearsay? According to the transcripts, on April 12th of 1992 interviews a few weeks before the Red Rum, defendant procured for Smith a .38 caliber revolver, a 9mm semi-automatic handgun. He was paid $1,000 per weapon plus costs. That's pretty good money. Procurement of the weapons came against the backdrop of the statement by Smith that his wife was running around on him. So here's where he's like, my wife is running around on me. That he was getting tired of her, that he wanted to have her killed for the $500,000 life insurance, and that he would pay $50,000 to have her killed. On the morning of the Red Rum, the defendant was at work in the nursery. I'm guessing they mean something else at the nursery, something about animals. It's not a child nursery. When Smith came in and handed him the .38 and a milk carton. So now Smith gave him a milk carton, a .38, which Smith said contained jewelry. Smith told the defendant to throw it all away. That's interesting. So he went into the house afterwards and took jewelry to make it look like a robbery. That's what happened. So he never took jewelry himself. He was given a milk carton full of jewelry because he knew he needed to make it look like a robbery, but still he didn't take the diamond ring, which I don't understand. And that's interesting. See, the husband went in there, took jewelry from the jewelry box, put it in there in the thing. Maybe he was too greedy, and the diamond ring he knew was worth money, and this other jewelry he knew was crap. But and he just couldn't help himself because he's a greedy, short, sighted dude. That makes sense to me. He left the diamond ring on his wife's hands because he would want to sell that, but this stuff is just garbage, fake jewelry. His wife probably had no idea. He gives it to Albert and said, throw it all away. And he didn't, which again, in my mind, shows that he had a mind of his own. He was able to disobey his overlord, and he couldn't have been groomed that much if he literally would disobey the man and bury it, unless you can argue that that was his way of getting away with it. Actually, okay, I just stopped my entire argument because in his mind that could have been the best way of getting away with it, and he never did unbury it and sell it. Okay, I just talked myself out of it. That is definitely possible. Smith had paid the defendant $10,000 with the promise that remainder within 5 years, while no more money was paid. The defendant made no demands on Smith, knowing of his various troubles. So he never said, hey, give me the other 40, which also can lead into him, him being afraid of him. He never said, give me more money. He never asked for it all the years later, including being in the focus of a federal investigation. Trial judge granted the defendant a motion in limine and excluded the letter. However, they excluded the letter. However, upon the state's application for supervisory writs, the Court of Appeal reversed the vacated trial court's ruling. So they said, okay, the letter is hearsay. And then they said, no, it's not hearsay. So this letter was written by the defendant Smith in an attempt to direct the defendant to keep his brother. Man, his brother was going to testify against Smith in an unrelated federal trial. With your help, I will most probably be found innocent and will be in position to help you should you or our mutual friend ever get in trouble. This is another ugly fact. If you don't help me, and if I'm found guilty because of your brother, it's his brother, not his personal brother, it was his brother. What? Albert's brother was going to testify against him. No kidding. That you don't help me, and if I'm found guilty because of your brother, then I am going to implicate you. You will get the death penalty. And I will implicate our mutual friend if he doesn't help. He will get the death penalty also. I don't know who the mutual friend is. And most of all, I will implicate your brother as a helper. Your brother will at least get life in prison, and maybe if I can be as good a witness as he has been against me, then maybe he will get the death penalty also. He's not great at writing. Not the most of these. So basically, his brother was going to testify against him in this case. So somehow he was in position to do that. He writes him and says, hey, you better get your brother. He's not telling him to knock his brother off. He's just telling him to tell his brother not to testify. And what a moron, because he puts that in writing. But you can tell we're not dealing with the sharpest tools in the shed. The letter goes on to urge defendants to find his brother because money and your job will do you no good if he shows up in court. The letter concludes by stating, please help me. We can all win. We can all do this. What a clown, though. He takes his wife, the mother of his children's lives. He ends up in prison over something else. I mean, just like totally a wrecking ball. Then he's dumb enough to write a letter out of jail. It should be noted that there are two separate letters written on two separate dates. They are both contained in the same envelope and state basically the same thing. Oh, they're in the same envelope. I mean, why didn't he just say, come visit me? Let's just talk. I doubt they had good enough recording equipment to record a conversation. Or just, you have your attorney there. Gosh, there's so many. I'm trying to see. In the instant case, the defendant argues conspiracy was terminated long before Smith's letter was written. He contends that the object of the conspiracy, the murder of Smith's wife, was accomplished in 1985, some 7 years before the letter was written in 1992. Moreover, he asserts that his confession established his abandoned any hopes of receiving the remainder of the money Smith owed him for the murder. That's true. He ain't getting it, right? Since he stated he decided to leave him alone after he became involved in the drug charges. Clearly, defendant failed to prove withdrawal from the conspiracy since he did not make clean breast through confession. That's what they're saying, basically. No, he did not, because he didn't confess. But yeah, when he confessed, he gets the death penalty. So, yeah, it's like, are you kidding me? There's everyone, the way the law treats people in these situations is also ridiculous. Moreover, we are convinced that the defendant proved he abandoned any efforts to collect the remainder of the money owned by Smith for the killing. While certain statements in defendant's confession suggest he did not intend to pursue Smith while the charges were pending, it is unclear whether the defendant gave up any hopes of ever receiving the money. Some statements in Smith's letter suggest it would be a defendant's best interest to have Smith acquitted, both in terms of keeping the murder quiet and collecting future money. In any event, we can find that even the letter was admitted erroneously. Any such error was harmless, blah, blah, blah. I don't know what they're saying about that. In light that the letter contained no evidence set forth in the defense confession. In fact, the letter makes no direct reference to the murder of Sheila Smith. Rather, it simply indicates that if Joey Smith was found guilty on the drug charges, he would implicate the defendant who would get the death penalty, and that the two other defendants, brother and our mutual friend, would also get the death penalty. Other than this vague reference, there is nothing in the letter to connect the defendant with the murder. Finally, it is noteworthy that the defendant himself relied on the letter at the penalty phase in order to support his argument that he was under Smith's domination of control. So he used this letter during the penalty phase to say, see, I was under his control. I had to obey him. Based on these facts, we conclude that the admission of the letter, even if erroneous, was harmless. I don't know how the letter's harmless if the letter is what initially got him on their radar and into an interrogation room, but okay. This is interesting, actually. Defendant contends that the trial judge erred in excluding hearsay testimony at the trial that Rodney Gillespie confessed to killing the victim. This is super interesting to me. I feel that this is really, if they needed any type of doubt, it would be, we have a confession. We have another confession that was retracted. But they were not allowed to say that. That is fascinating to me. He argues that the exclusion, they called it hearsay. How is it hearsay if he confessed in a interrogation room on the record? Wow. Court, how a judge runs his courtroom, sometimes it seems totally arbitrary, because I can see that being allowed into evidence. But they knew if that was brought into evidence that it would be a mistrial. He argues that the exclusion of the evidence interfered with his constitutional right to present a defense. At trial, defendants sought to establish that Rodney Gillespie confessed his involvement in the Red Room to several individuals. Gillespie was unable to be served with a subpoena because he was working offshore. However, defendant sought to call as witnesses. Oh, he said that he confessed to individuals? I thought he confessed to police. However, defendant sought to call as witness Joe Jenkins, author James Washington, and Wilfred Freeman, claiming these witnesses would testify that Gillespie confessed his involvement. The trial judge denied the reception of any hearsay testimony ruling that the defendant could not call as a witness those individuals that had been told by Rodney Gillespie, a person that is not on trial, that he was the one who actually killed Sheila Smith. Nevertheless, the trial judge apparently did not adhere to this ruling, since all the witnesses defendant sought to call, with the exception of Arthur James, did testify at trial. Huh. Yeah. But moral of the story is just don't red rum anyone, so you don't find yourself in what probably is, I think, pretty unfair situations a lot of the time. I mean, think of the fact that they did have someone who confessed to doing this crime, and they bring up the confession. Didn't in Washington jail testified that Washington told him that Gillespie killed Sheila Smith. According to Freeman, Washington told him that he and Gillespie went to the Smith residence to do some stealing cars and riding lawnmowers. Washington told Freeman that Gillespie didn't have to kill the girl. Freeman went on to testify that Washington told him the victim was laying with her legs open and commented on seeing her genital area. Finally, Freeman testified that Washington told him, and that would go to the fact that that she was naked when she was killed too. So how would he know that? When they got over there, he said he went to hollering, and I think Gillespie grabbed her by the hair and pulled her, and he say she took off running, and then he hollered again, and then they say Gillespie shot her. I think Gillespie shot her 4 or 5 times, but I think she was hit once in the face. I think 4 or 5 times. Well, that's actually also true. She was hit once in the chest and 4 times in the face. I don't understand what's going on anymore. In addition to the testimony, officers Lemoyne testified that the investigation. Okay, I'm really kind of lost right now, and I'm sure there's only like 3 of you still watching this. I'll put the links in the description though. He was denied a rehearing. This is the hearing, or this is the information in the Supreme Court that he was taken off of death row. The transcript of the trial reads more like a fiction than an American tragedy, which left a woman murdered for hire, the shooter on death row, and the man who solicited and paid for the murder convicted, but sentenced to life in prison rather than facing the death penalty. I should have started with this. This actually does read well. Lavalais was a 19-year-old farmhand working on the Smith family farm in Cottonport, Louisiana, when George Paul Joey Smith talked him into killing his wife, Sheila Smith, for $50,000. He actually paid $10,000. Smith collected $500,000 in insurance proceeds, and authorities also, although suspicious, were never able to make the case against him. Plantation would be a more accurate word than farm to describe the vast land holdings owned by Smith family, because he included the definition of land mass is a historical relationship between black farm workers and property owners. At Smith's trial, the prosecutor argued that Smith was a descendant from a plantation family that farms thousands of acres of farmland, cattle, rice, cotton, beans, and corn, and that the defendant's family was part of his plantation culture, and that family members lived and worked in the fields. The prosecutor acknowledged that Lavalais family members worked for Smith before and after the murder, and there was a very close relationship between Smith and Alberte and the family. And as can be expected with any plantation culture, after living on the land for several generations, individuals become economically dependent and can easily be intimidated into carrying out the wishes of landowners, even when doing so it is not in their best interest. Such individuals become bound by emotional ties which are not easily untangled because of these circumstances. Who wrote this? Is this the appeal for the death penalty? Underlining Lavalais' action and the nature of his relationship. Let me just see who wrote this. Supreme Court on direct appeal. Okay. Underlining actions and the nature of his relationship, Smith and Lavalais was under the dominion of the control of Smith, and such fact that would have been a mitigating factor during the sentencing phase of Lavalais' trial. Even the state acknowledged at Smith's trial the fact that Lavalais was under Smith's dominion and control. During Smith's trial, the state presented the testimony of Charlene Coco, the victim's aunt, who testified that Smith boasted how Lavalais looked up to him as his parrain, a term used throughout academia that translates to godfather. He sees me as his godfather. Coco testified to the following conversation, and Smith put his arm around Alberte's shoulder and said, "Isn't that right? You think of me as your parrain, and you would do anything I ask you to do, wouldn't you, Albert?" And Albert looked at him and repeated it. He said, "You look at me and your parrain, and if I asked you to do anything, you would do it for me." And Albert answered, "Yes, I would." In addition, during the state's opening argument, the Smith trial, the prosecutor described the defendant as a teenager who was manipulated and coerced into committing a homicide by a wealthy and powerful planter from Conport. The prosecutor further argued that Smith was a manipulative, a cunning, a scheming, and a planning individual. What is more interesting is that while the state put the above stated evidence in Smith's trial in 1995, at Lavalais' trial in 1983, the state refuted the contention that he was acting under the dominion of the control of Smith. The state expressly argued against the presence of his mitigating factor in its penalty phase opening statement. Under these facts and circumstances, impose of the death penalty is excessive and disproportionate. A comparative review of murder for hire cases revealed that throughout the state of Louisiana since 1976, there have been relatively few murder for hire situations, with the exception of one case prosecuted under Louisiana RS 1430A4, in which a life sentence had been recommended. This case remains the only case in which a death sentence was imposed for conviction under and State v. Smith. The sentence size procured and paid Smith for the killing, and the victim had testified against several individuals on charge of conspiracy to distribute Pepsi Cola in Florida. To execute the killing, Smith constructed an explosive device, affixed it to the victim's pickup truck, and was paid for doing so. Although the defendant were initially sentenced to death, this court overturned their convictions and sentence remanded for a new trial. They're talking about the different case. Yet, in the present case, I don't know if I'm not pronouncing his name right, Lavalais, who is a young black man who was 19 at the time of the crime, received the death penalty, while Smith, who was white, was sentenced to life imprisonment. In juxtaposition, these cases offer striking examples of age-old stereotypes and prejudices. That was prejudice, but that state and federal jurisprudence has tried to rectify in capital cases. Unfortunately, such objectives and goals were not met in this case. By the foregoing reason, I respectfully dissent. So, I mean, we know that he was, it's still unclear to me if this is, but he was given he was commuted, which I don't think you should have gotten the death penalty. I mean, death penalty needs to be reserved for the harshest of cases. And now he's given a second chance. And after everything we just read for the past 40 minutes, and I do salute all of you who had to suffer through that while I mumbled and jumbled through a bunch of transcripts. I salute you. Do you think that he should gotten his sentence commuted? I mean, when it's all said and done, it's very easy for me to say yes. I don't think he will commit another crime, and I do think that he served his time, and he served his time well. I don't think he would have committed a crime if he wasn't under the spell of this man. It's still hard to think that you would take someone's life when they have babies, but maybe at 19, when he's, he was an older sibling of, I think, 9 or 10 kids. It's hard to understand it, man. And he did get paid 10 grand, but he served a long time. And I don't think he's a danger to society. But love to hear your thoughts as always. And please do the YouTube algorithm thing. It does make a big difference. And with that, I'll let you go.